Welcome to the Buffalo Sports Report with Stu Boyar and Tony Fiorello. Presented by 300 Level Media. Sponsored by Logistics Plus of Buffalo, providing services for all of your logistics needs. Now, here's your host, Stu Boyar.
Welcome to the Buffalo Sports Report, brought to you by AdPro and Logistics Plus. I'm Stu Boyar, along with Tony Fiorello from the 300 Level. And Tony, we have an extremely unusual situation with the Buffalo Bills. We'll look back at last week's game, but first this week, the Bills were supposed to play the Tennessee Titans Sunday, and it's been moved to Tuesday because the Titans just can't get it out of their own way in terms of COVID-19 and violating protocols. Yeah. So for the second week in a row, the Titans have disrupted the National Football League, and in my opinion, they should pay a heavy, heavy price.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, this is an extremely weird situation. Yeah. Like you said, because I saw something last night saying that this would be the first game I think played, or maybe the first or second game since 1946 to be played on a Tuesday in the NFL. And I said, wow, that's just crazy. But anyway, it was what Tennessee has done is completely irresponsible and ignorant too, because this isn't a football matter or anything. It's a public health and a public safety matter too. Yes. Because to think what's funny is that after I believe it was Paul Kuharski, who's a Titans beat reporter, he broke the news, and a couple other guys, I think Jim Wyatt and a couple other Titans reporters followed up on that. Afterwards, some of the Titans players went after them on social media, calling them out and saying, why are you picking on us and all that other stuff? We're trying to practice. Well, you shouldn't be practicing. You broke protocol. Why would you even do that? Use your head. Use common sense, guys.
Yeah, well,
if they tell you to stay out of the facility and don't practice, stay out of the facility.
Well, the problem with common sense is you see the window we're looking at, common sense went out that window a long time ago, unfortunately. But now, before we look more at Tennessee and that whole situation, the NFL, like I said, should throw the book at them, fine them, and make it a large enough fine that it'll really hurt them, take away a couple of draft choices, just really, really make them pay for it. Yeah. The Bills are 4-0. They whipped the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh Allen, another outstanding game. And, the path he is on is pretty incredible. There was a scary moment where he hurt his left shoulder. Then he came back in the game, and later in the game had a quarterback sneak. Mm-hmm. So no one really knows how sore that shoulder is as him. He's practiced fully, but that kind of stuff is inspirational. And, boy, some of the throws he continues to make are incredible. So, and in the second half, the defense, 3 takeaways, two strips and fumble recoveries and a stop on fourth down. You get that kind of defense, you're going to win a lot of football games.
Yeah, I mean, I get that they still allowed 23 points, but at the same time, I feel like the way football has been going the last several years, as long as you have an adequate enough defense and a middle-of-the-pack defense or something like that, and a good offense, you can win games. You can win the Super Bowl. Look at Kansas City. The first half of the year, their defense was trash, and then once they started getting the hang of Steve Spagnuolo's system, they won the Super Bowl. And the defense got red hot, and then it complemented Mahomes and Kelsey and the rest of that, and Tyreek Hill and the rest of that offense pretty well, and they ended up winning the whole thing. So I mean, it's not like this is an era where it's like where you have to have a defense like the '85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens or the '02 Bucks or the 2013 Seahawks. And as long as you have a solid enough defense and a
very good offense
and a very good offense, you can win the whole thing.
Well, it seems like certain truisms are changing.
Yep, and not only that, but to add on to that answer is also if you create turnovers.
Right,
and that's what Buffalo did last week.
That's what I was getting at. Yep. That certain truisms, like nowadays it's all about the passing game. Mm-hmm. You use the passing game to set up the running game. You run to kill the clock. Yeah. And the Bills did a really good job on Josh Jacobs, who's one of the better running backs in the NFL. Mm-hmm. I think they held him to less than 60 yards,
something like that.
So. The game has evolved and changed, and I think this year, just from watching games and seeing how they're calling penalties, there is more passing than ever, and they seem to want it that way because points are what people like to see. Like if you watch the Cowboys and the Browns last week, the Dallas defense is horrendous. Yeah. But let's face it, offense is exciting. Offense is what sells. Or you want to say defense wins? Fine, I'm not going to argue that. But when you're looking for TV ratings and eyeballs, score points.
Yeah. It's funny. The first 4 weeks have almost looked like arena football league games.
I hadn't thought of that.
It's almost like 51 to 49 games every single week.
Yeah.
And it's it's all great for now. And yes, the passing game has obviously looked very, very good for everybody. Almost everybody.
And it's looked fabulous for the Bills.
Unless you're a team like the New York Jets. But
well, yeah. It's got to be somebody that's going to bring up the rear.
Exactly. But, at the same time, when you think about it, the first 2 months, usually the passing game looks great. But then when the weather starts to turn in November and December,
you got to run it.
You got to have the ability to maybe not necessarily run the ball all the time. It's not necessarily about the quantity of runs, but it's about the quality.
Yes.
You can run the ball very well without necessarily having to give the rock to a running back 25, 30 times a game.
True, especially when you have a quarterback like, say, Josh Allen.
Yeah. I mean, you even look at somebody like I think the one team that proved that very, very long ago was the Greatest Show on Turf.
Yes, they were fun to watch.
They used to throw the ball 30, 40, 50 times a game. You sit there, you think of the Greatest Show on Turf. You had Warner, Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Orlando Pace, all those guys chucking the ball over the yard. But
who was the running back?
Marshall Faulk.
No, he was pretty good too.
But at the same time, he wasn't getting 25, 30 carries a game all the time.
No.
More often than not, it was 15, 20, maybe every once in a while 25.
And he would catch passes too.
Yeah, and he'd catch 80 balls a year.
Well, and going back to the Bills, the fun part is obviously they're 4-0. Mm-hmm. You could make an argument, and I would say that they could be considered the best team in the league.
Yeah,
I mean, if they got to be close, right? I mean, they're 4-0.
They're right up there.
Right?
Right now, they look right up there with some of the better teams in the league, and and it's a real shame that the NFL Network and Fox get to lose that Thursday night game if it's moved to Sunday. Against Kansas City, if that has to be moved, it's a shame that the league has to miss out on a marquee matchup like that.
Well, the real shame is. Yes, but the real shame, and it's true for everybody, there are no fans in the stands.
Yeah.
It's a much better test both ways.
Yeah.
Like if the Bills had to go to the Chiefs or vice versa. Because the Chiefs had some really good teams in the Bills Super Bowl era, but they couldn't win at Bills Stadium, which was then Ralph Wilson or Rich Stadium, whatever. And the Bills, it was a huge win when the Bills went to Kansas City and won there. Those are tough places to play, and that's part of it. But Josh Allen, to me, the best part of Josh Allen's success is seeing him prove all those doubters wrong.
Yeah.
He's just, you got to love everything about him. The attitude, the love his teammates have for him, and how he'll put himself on the line for his teammates. Mm-hmm. Go back to that quarterback sneak against Dallas last year, where he outmuscles a defensive lineman. I mean, how cool was that? And even Sunday, you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, thank God it's his left arm, but you don't know if is he going to come back. When he came back, he looks a little tentative, and you're like, oh man, that must be bothering him. The extra days off, maybe it'll help him. And then he was a quarterback sneak for a touchdown, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you got to love that. And I think those are all some of the reasons why his teammates just love the guy. They obviously play for him. Yeah. And look how he's embraced all the coaching. He's been very fortunate if you look at his situation versus Sam Darnold, the consistency on the coaching staff, the way and I'm not saying Sam doesn't embrace coaching, but look, 3 years with Daboll, 3 years with McDermott, and all that stuff pays off. There's a trust element.
Yeah.
And all the hard work Josh has put in, and they went out and got Stefan Diggs, and man, they are fun to watch. And that throw and catch to Cole Beasley last week.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know what the extremely ironic thing is? Going into that draft, I get the sense that most Bills fans going into that draft wanted Josh Rosen. The opposite Josh. And the funny thing is, the one thing that was the knock that was going on Allen going into that draft, from what I remember, was that he had all the intangibles in the world, all the leadership, all the toughness. People raved about his character and all that other stuff. But they said, at the end of the day, how is his play going to jump from Wyoming, which isn't exactly the biggest, college team, to playing in the NFL and at a high level, And people thought that, maybe his physical traits wouldn't hold up. But, the thing that people discounted was hard work. Allen he's improved, he's put in that work to make himself better. And his talent is now starting to match the intangibles.
Well, you just pointed out the whole key to me to scouting. I'm sure analytics is part of it, but you can't. The NFL teams are kind of like doing what the colleges team done after you've put out a profile of yourself as a college player, and now they have to determine if you have the capability to make the next step in all phases.
Right.
So, and there are certain things you can't account for. Some people are just plain gamers. Look how great he's been in the fourth quarter his entire 3 years with the Bills. He's just, that's just the way the kid's wired. And the Bills, obviously, they traded up to get him. There were other guys there, and including Josh Rosen, that they could have taken. But to their credit, they had enough information on him that they were very confident in the pick. They were willing to live with whatever mistakes he was going to make, because you're all going to make mistakes.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Every young quarterback does.
Every one of them. Although, again, the game is evolving again, because Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, are they rewriting the book on you can't win with a rookie quarterback? Now, Herbert didn't win, and neither did Burrow, but they're playing, and they're far from disastrous.
Yeah.
So to your point about the hard work, that those are all the Josh intangibles. Remember, Rob Johnson had all the tools too, but he didn't have all the stuff that Josh Allen had.
Yeah.
Both California kids, right?
Yeah.
But just wired differently.
Yeah.
And one of them, fortunately, Josh, is not made out of like paper mache, because Rob was always getting hurt.
And the other thing with Rob Johnson was that he had the talent, but he didn't have the intangibles.
Yes, exactly.
But that's what separated him from Doug Flutie, because Flutie had the intangibles, and he also had some talent too. But yes, but to your point, that's what Allen's done. He's completely improved himself, and like you said, he's also been put in a good situation, and with a front office and a coaching staff that knows how to build around him.
Yes.
And, like you mentioned,
GM.
With Sam Darnold, obviously, the Jets have struggled with player development for God knows how long. That's why you see every couple of years the Jets just spend like crazy in free agency. And why is that? Because they can't draft and they can't develop. And another example, look at Baker Mayfield. Cleveland has gone through a couple of coaching staffs now, and that's because the Haslams are always impatient, and they don't know how to run a team.
Right, you keep hiring and firing coaches.
Yeah,
you're in a cycle that's no good.
And it's a perpetuous cycle that keeps going on, and it's gonna. And if put it this way, if the Browns don't keep what they're doing right now with Stefanski, and it seems like they're doing pretty well with that, they're gonna ruin Baker Mayfield as well. But yes, anyways, but back to Allen. Buffalo's doing a real good job.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. It's exciting, and I wish they were playing Tennessee right now so they could kick their you-know-what. Anyway, we got to take a break. We're brought to you by AdPro and Logistics, and we'll be back after this.
Logistics Plus is a global transportation provider headquartered in Erie, PA, with locations worldwide, including right here in Western New York. Logistics Plus is consistently recognized as a fast-growing transportation and logistics company, great supply chain partner, top freight broker, leading project cargo manager, and a great place to work. With a strong passion for excellence, our 500-plus employees put the plus in logistics. Call our Buffalo office today for an efficient, personal approach for all of your transportation needs.
300 Level Media is a locally owned and operated, multi-purpose media company right here in Western New York. You'll find us everywhere, covering the Bills, Sabres, Beauts, Bisons, Big Four basketball, local college sports, and much more. Our staff offers a variety of media services, from video production, live event coverage, audio broadcasts, professional voiceovers, camera operation, and videography. Visit www.300levelmedia.com or give us a call at 716-427-2600. This is 300 Level Media.
Welcome back to the Buffalo Sports Report. Stu Boyar, Tony Fiorello. We're talking a lot about the Buffalo Bills, team you could say right now is the best team in the NFL. You could argue that. And unfortunately, the Bills won't play Sunday, and the whole schedule's screwed up because the Tennessee Titans are irresponsible. And that's being very kind. And, when the Bills and Kansas City meet right now, a week from Sunday, they both could be 5-0.
Yeah.
And maybe that game will determine which team this season right now is the best. And until somebody obviously knocks off Kansas City, they're still the champions. But you got to feel better about the Bills, and you're having a long, long time.
Yeah. I mean, right now they're leading the AFC East, and the last time Buffalo won the AFC East, 1995.
Wow.
Also, the last year they won a playoff game.
Yeah.
That's really unbelievable. It's 25 years.
Yeah, that's unacceptable, by the way.
Yeah.
Matt Milano, big loss for the Bills defense.
Yeah.
Pectoral injury, right?
Yep.
He's a player they need out there.
Yeah.
John Brown, maybe with a hamstring issue. He was at practice, but he may have re-injured it yesterday, which would be Thursday. We taped this on Friday morning. So there's some issues. One of the exciting things to turn more to it. Obviously, you want everybody healthy and on the field. How about Gabriel Davis?
Yeah. I mean, he was the talk of training camp.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to see why. Because
Yeah.
it's not like we could really see, at least this year either, it's not like we could really see, highlights from training camp or preseason games to have been able to judge Davis and say, oh, wow, this kid's going to be the breakout star this year. But you know what? He's played pretty well for a fourth-round rookie. He's come in and he's stepped up well. And if Brown has to miss any time, and quite frankly, I'm surprised that Brown didn't miss any time last year because that was the knock on him throughout his career. Arizona and Baltimore, he had some injury problems, hamstring issues too, were some of his issues. But anyways, to your point, if Brown has to miss any time, and I'm pretty comfortable with Davis having to step up and play.
I mean, to me, that's one of those great stories that you want every year. Because it's just the way it is. There are expectations for first-round draft picks. Not nearly as many expectations for later round draft picks. I guess the fourth round would be considered a later round at this point. But for a guy to come in as a fourth round pick and earn a spot and to earn that much playing time, to me, that's a great story. That's what makes sports fun. It's like, well, they drafted this guy in the fourth round, but yeah, look at him. He's really good. And that tells you, again, the scouting staff wasn't all analytics. It was the eyeballs and the gut feeling. Was it all analytics that Brandon Beane decided that Josh Allen was going to be the franchise quarterback? No, it was his head, his heart, what he saw on film.
Yeah.
So it can't just, and analytics obviously plays a role. But why don't you ask the Yankees about analytics in Game 2, even if they win that series? But I digress. But a kid like Gabriel Davis, that first touchdown, was it last week? The first touchdown was to Davis, right?
Might have been, yeah. I think he did. I think he scored a touchdown in.
Yeah, I think he's got 2 or 3 touchdowns, and I'm like, he's good for one reception a game, and it's a touchdown. I'll take that every week.
They draft him for his size, did they not?
Yeah,
that's what Buffalo lacked.
Yeah.
This year. You had Beasley, who's I think 5'8". John Brown's about 5'10", 5'11".
They're not the biggest guys.
Stefan Diggs is about 6'0". They brought in Davis, for his size and for red zone play, and he's
delivered.
That's paid off, and and credit to like you said, to their front office. It's not just Beane either.
No.
You look, Buffalo might have, and this has been this way for the last couple of years. They honestly might have the most stacked front office in the NFL. Joe Shane, the assistant general manager. Terrence Gray, they brought him in from Minnesota a couple of years ago. He's a crucial part of that front office. Brian Gaine, they brought him back after Houston let him go.
Right.
Dan Morgan. These guys are just a phenomenal front
Well, the
office.
proof's right there on the field because it's each year it seems like almost their entire draft class makes the team and many contribute. And when they bring up guys on the practice squad, they seem to deliver in whatever role they're expected to more often than not all the time, obviously. And each week you just can't go without talking about Stefan Diggs.
Right.
He's so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, wow.
He's on pace, I think, to get about 100, maybe 105 catches. The only other receiver in Bill's history to get that is Eric Moulds. I mean, honestly, how many Bills receivers have had over 90 catches in a season? I think Andre Reed might have had one or two.
Jerry Butler?
I don't believe Jerry Butler
No?
did.
Okay.
Reed had I think maybe one or two. I know Peerless Price had that 94 catch season his last year here. Eric Moulds had a couple 90 catch seasons and a 100 catch season. But other than that,
not too many.
no. And that honestly speaks to how mediocre Buffalo's passing game was for so long. Buffalo's passing game was just not very good.
So
for
and
a long time. And Diggs has been a godsend.
Oh God, what a great move!
Yeah.
Now you've piqued my curiosity. Lofton, Beebe, Reed. There were no 100-yard catches in that group with Kelly.
100 catch seasons? At least no, I don't think so.
Wow, we should probably look that up.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if I don't think they had them.
Okay. Well, either way, and I saw a tweet this morning about Josh Allen, and it was like in his last 19. Let's see if I can find it. Greg Cosell pointed this out. I don't remember who tweeted this, but it's like Allen in his last X number of games had. I'll never find it now. I should have saved it. Has had like 30 touchdowns and 2 interceptions or some such thing. Yeah. It's like, wow. But you can see all that hard work just – I don't want to spend the whole show on Josh Allen, but I just really like him, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
So should we switch, talk a little hockey now and the NHL draft? And
if you want, sure.
Okay. I'm easy. Jack Quinn.
Yeah.
You know what I loved about that pick? Goal scorer. You can't have enough of them. I was okay. He's not going to be here this year. That's fine. But what have the Sabres lacked for a long time?
Secondary scoring.
Thank you.
Yep.
So you can't have enough goal scorers in your organization.
Right. Yeah.
And no one knows what's going to happen when he gets here. But Jack Eichel's still getting better.
Yeah.
He'll be here.
Olafson's going to get better.
He should be here, right?
Reinhart.
Well, they got to sign him.
Yep.
And now there's word out this morning from Darren Drager that I saw in one of Paul Hamilton's tweets that the Sabres will present to Taylor Hall. Can you pay both Hall and Reinhart?
With the amount of cap space that Buffalo has, they should, but they won't.
Well, not with the amount of money Taylor Hall's going to command, right?
Yeah.
And are they doing that just for show?
I think so. I think it's for public relations purposes.
But didn't they say they wanted to be efficient?
Yeah, they want to have efficient, which is really more or less code word for a budget team.
You really can't have this stuff both ways.
Right? Yeah.
The Sabres signed Zemgus Girgensons Friday morning to what, a 3 year?
3 years, $2.2 million a year.
Okay, so they spent money on a fourth liner. Their fourth line was actually pretty good, but that's money on a fourth liner who's been here and has been part of the losing. So you can argue that whichever way you want.
By the way, John Vogel of The Athletic tweeted out, I think it was either yesterday or it was this morning, saying that this is the 4th general manager in Buffalo who has given him a contract, which must be really, really hard to do. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But it's unbelievable. They say that they want to, they want to have an internal budget. They want to be more, cost effective, more efficient, and yet they give Girgensons $2.2 million a year. You know what I mean?
And they didn't sign Dominic Cahoon yet.
Yeah.
And they may not sign him. They didn't give him a qualifying offer.
If they somehow don't bring him back, that's wasted asset management, and that's what Buffalo's been doing for the last couple of years. You wonder why they've been a bottom feeder for the last several years.
Well, and the other thing is there are a lot of free agent goaltenders on the market, which is getting underway right now, free agency, and you would think the Sabres need some help in goaltending at least until Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen gets here, assuming he turns into the player they believed he would be when they drafted him. Unless you think that Linus Ullmark is going to be your number one guy, you would think that they would maybe look at a buyout for Carter Hutton or see what they could get for Carter Hutton, who, had some fine moments in his time here, but he's struggled a lot. Let's face it. He's a solid pro in terms of on and off the ice. But the performance hasn't been what you'd hoped it would be.
Right. Before I follow up on that, though, you mentioned Jack Quinn earlier, Buffalo drafting him.
Yes.
Everybody and their mother wanted Buffalo to take Marco Rossi at that
right.
selection, or Cole Perfetti.
Right. I remember that. Yes.
I get that at some point. For most of their time together with Ottawa with the 67s out there, Rossi and Quinn, they were line mates, and Rossi drove a good portion of his game.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, well, at least according to the analytics.
There's that word again.
Yeah, analytics. You could ask somebody like Chad DeMonicis from Die by the Blade more questions about that, 'cause he knows more about that than I do.
Okay.
But at the same time, I get that Rossi drove a good portion of this game, but somebody's got to put the goals away, right?
Listen, why do goal scorers, home run hitters, and quarterbacks get paid?
Because we put points on the board.
Because they have the ability to finish. I don't care what sport it is. You can't score, you can't win. I'll take. I mean, you got to score goals. So I'm very happy that they took Jack Quinn. I thought it was interesting going back to Dominic Cahoon. Ralph Kruger really has a great relationship with this guy. Really likes him. Ralph Kruger came out this week. He said he could see Dylan Cousins starting his career on the right wing and then transitioning him to center. So there are a lot of things in play for the Sabres. Yeah. And I would really like to see him bring back Cahoon at a reasonable price, because you got to be reasonable in this day and age, because I thought he was a good fit here.
Yeah. Cahoon seems like the kind of guy who could get about 40, 45 points a year. Maybe at some point he'll top out at 50, but he said he did like playing here.
Right.
Why wouldn't you want to bring him back?
Maybe he wants to test the market and see what kind of money he can get too. Though, don't forget that.
That too, and also like you were talking about goaltending too.
I was gonna. Of all the free agent goaltenders, which one would you like to see in a Sabres uniform? That's a tough question. I worked at Channel 2. We ask tough questions.
Yeah. There's so many guys out in the open market. Lundqvist got bought out by the Rangers, but the rumor is that he wants to go to Washington. 1-year deal maybe to back up Ilya Samsonov there. Corey Crawford's not going back to Chicago. I'd be leery of giving him.
I'd be leery of a guy like
with his concussion issues.
Yes.
And his age coming up.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be leery with that. Maybe Marc-Andre Fleury for a couple years. I know with Vegas, after Vegas went to the finals, they gave him a 3-year extension, and that kind of hurt their cap.
And then Robin Leonard beat him out.
And then Robin Leonard beat him out so much so to the point that they gave him an extension, and now it seems like Fleury's on his way out of Vegas. Anton Hudobin is also on the market. He played pretty well for Dallas.
He really did. I mean, he won a couple of games for him.
Without Ben Bishop there.
Right.
But, it's...
So, there's some choice.
Jacob Markstrom's also out
right.
from Vancouver.
Right. So there's some pretty, and Alex Pietrangelo out there too, a different position, a defenseman. I don't see the Sabres spending that kind of money on a player like that, but stranger things have happened, right?
Yeah.
And and for some reason, I know that's a bad way to put it, but Ralph Kruger really likes Rasmus Ristolainen. A lot of people have called for him to be moved. Mm-hmm. So the Sabres have, Kevin Adams has a lot of moves he can make and a lot of things he can do and some pretty tough decisions to make.
Yeah. Honestly, Ristolainen sometimes he just makes decisions on the ice that just make you scratch your head and say, dude, you're not 19 years old anymore. Why do you still make those certain decisions with the puck? I remember a couple games last year where he'd be behind his net trying to start a breakout from behind his net, and instead of putting it up the ice, trying to connect it with somebody else. As soon as a guy came in on him on a forecheck, what did he do? He tried to bang the puck off the boards. Try to dump it out. It's like, dude, you had a guy wide open there, and what happened after he tried to do that? It turned it over. Turned it over, turned to a scoring opportunity for the opposition. And then I remember he also got a couple 2-on-1s. He misplayed them. I think it was against Detroit back in January or February. It was just
I remember them losing to Detroit.
A really bad loss to Detroit in January or February, pretty much right when the discontent with the team was just really
the fans were outraged.
Just starting to boil over.
Yes.
And that might have been the icing on the cake, that loss to Detroit. And Ristolainen that is playing that game, especially on a couple 2-on-1s, you're just sitting there like, dude, you've been in the league since 2013 now. He needs to start making more consistent decisions and better decisions than he did when he was a rookie, and he's been in the league for 7 years now.
Long enough.
And he's still a turnover machine and still just making head scratching decisions to the point where it's just like, I get that you're decent on the power play, and I get that every once in a while, you can create some scoring opportunities, but there's got to be some sort of a change there because he cannot be a top pair defenseman.
Okay,
Bottom pair.
we're going to ask you about the rest of the Sabres draft when we come back. We're brought to you by AdPro and Logistics Plus, and we're going to hear a word from our sponsors right now.
WNYathletics.com is the premier high school sports website in Western New York, providing the best sports coverage of Section 6 and Monsignor Martin leagues. Check out our page for daily game recaps and late-breaking sports news. Our online scoreboards are updated in real time. Never miss a goal or touchdown. Visit WNYathletics.com today or follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube.
Hi, I'm Paul Wolf, local independent insurance agent for over 15 years. We represent over 30 insurance companies to try to find the best coverage and the best price for you. We're family owned and operated. We specialize in auto, home, and commercial insurance.
Call the Paul Wolf Agency today at 835-9653 or stop in at 2686 Elmwood Avenue in Kenmore.
The next time your insurance rates go up,
call the Wolf.
Logistics Plus is a global transportation provider headquartered in Erie, PA with locations worldwide, including right here in Western New York. Logistics Plus is consistently recognized as a fast-growing transportation and logistics company, great supply chain partner, top freight broker, leading project cargo manager, and a great place to work. With a strong passion for excellence, our 500-plus employees put the plus in logistics. Call our Buffalo office today for an efficient, personal approach for all of your transportation needs.
We're back on the Buffalo Sports Report. I'm Stu Boyar along with Tony Fiorello and some interesting hockey stuff. The big one right now seems to be Tampa Bay has waived Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, it sounded well. They were trying to trade him, and somehow apparently they couldn't find any sort of a trade partner for him because I guess he has some sort of a limited no trade clause or no move clause or something like that. But then surprisingly, they ended up waiving him.
Sabres? Shouldn't they grab him?
I wouldn't mind it.
I wouldn't mind it either.
If I was a Sabres fan, I would not mind it. You know
Wait, but you're not a Sabres fan?
Well,
Oh, we're in the media.
Media.
Yeah, okay.
But
I'm not in the media anymore. I do this, so yeah, I grab him. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I get it. But hey, look at but he would be a tremendous second, third line guy for Buffalo.
I think so.
He absolutely would be.
And the Sabres have lost Wayne Simmons to Toronto 1 year, $1.5 million. But the Leafs still need a goaltender.
Yeah, absolutely they do. Anderson's, like you said, Anderson's not
the answer.
Yeah. By the way, the reason why we're looking at our phones is it is as of this taping right now. It is Friday. It's 12:15. Free agency just started 15 minutes ago, so that's why we're looking at our phones.
Right. The Sabres, like I said, have lost Wayne Simmons.
Yep.
I like the addition, but let's face it, he's no longer quite the player that he was when he was younger. He was one of those guys who could score, he could fight, he was tough. I still like him as a player, but he's very much a role player now.
Yeah.
I
know Kruger really liked him.
Well, how could you not like Wayne Simmons?
Yeah.
I mean,
he's been there. He's been there, done that. He hasn't won. I don't think he ever won a cup, but
didn't he win with New Jersey? No, I don't remember.
No, I don't believe so. But he's been around the block.
He's been on some really good teams. Those Flyer teams he was on were pretty good.
Yeah, he's been around the block. He's played competitive hockey for a while, and they brought him in to help out with some of the younger guys on the team, and I'm kind of not surprised to see him leave.
No, me neither.
Because he wants to win. His career's winding down. I'm not surprised.
Well, if he really wanted to win, why would you go to Toronto? The Sabres have issues, but the Leafs are as soft as that's a soft hockey team. They got tons of talent, and I think they're not strong enough in goal, and they got too many of the guys who are alike.
Yeah, and on defense too. They brought in Tyson Barrie last year. That didn't work.
Didn't help.
Yeah, and their salary cap wise, they're extremely top heavy.
Right.
They've invested so much money in Matthews, Tavares, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Morgan Riley. They have so many guys who they've given money to, and now if they want to go out and sign a guy like Pietrangelo, which I believe the favorites for him are Toronto and Vegas. They're probably going to have to move somebody like, let's say, William Nylander. Maybe they move him to Minnesota for somebody like, let's say, Matthew Dumba. They might have to do that in order to make the money work.
Yeah.
They've got moves. They've got things that they've got to do. And Kyle Dubas has his hands full.
Well, he's one of those guys who, listen, to be a GM of a professional sports teams, you got to have a lot of guts.
Yeah.
And you got to be willing to take big-time risks to win. Because my guess is you look at all the teams who've won – those GMs took big risks because they had to, and sometimes it's going to blow up in your face and you get fired. Yeah. And I think they all accept that. And I think Kyle Dubas is one of those guys whose seat's getting hotter by the day because the Leafs, they're a failure.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got all that talent and they can't get out of the first or second round.
Yeah, they cannot get out of the first round.
So,
it's unbelievable.
So they're missing something there.
Yeah.
Part of it's goaltending and part of it is
maybe depth.
Well, you got to have enough role players. You can have all the star players you want, right? But it's the role players who. It sounds odd, but you just can't win without role players. You got to have guys who know what the role is, and come in and execute it, and they embrace the role. You don't have that, you're not going to win. I mean, teams that win the Stanley Cup. They have got usually 3 good lines and a great fourth line. A fourth line that can change the momentum of a game, score a goal here and there, but they flip it and they keep that other team bottled up in their own end. And Toronto is just, well, in some way they're better than the Sabres, but they have similar issues.
Yeah. But
you know what? We'd be happy if the Sabres could get into the first round. Then we'd be mad when they got knocked out.
Yeah.
So it's like a horse race. They're here, we're here, and neither one's making any real progress.
And and to that point, you were talking about fourth lines. Why? There's a reason why in every game of the Stanley Cup Finals, Dallas would come out with their big guns right off the hop. What would Tampa do?
Fourth line.
They would immediately throw out their fourth line with Yanni Gourde, Barclay Goodrow, and Blake Coleman every time.
And they were great.
Yeah. They acquired Goodrow and Coleman. There's a reason why they gave up a first-round pick for Goodrow to San Jose. And there's a reason why they gave up their first-round pick from the year prior, Nolan Foote, Adam Foote's kid. There's a reason why they gave him up to New Jersey to go get Blake Coleman. Because Tampa was loaded with talent for so long.
But they couldn't win. And the reason why, because like you said, because they lacked a fourth line. Yeah.
And not only were those guys, tough grinding out guys, and I get that you can get a lot of those guys anywhere, but not only were they good at that, but they were also phenomenal penalty killers.
Yeah, well, you gotta have all this stuff.
Dallas's power play going into those finals was red hot. And what did Tampa do? Coleman and Goodrow completely shut that down. As far as I know, Dallas only had 1 or 2 power play goals that entire 6-game series.
I think you're right. And the funny thing is, usually in the playoffs, you don't expect to see so many goals, but there were an awful lot of goals scored in the playoffs this year because it's been a wacky year.
Yeah.
But there's certain kinds of guys you have to have.
Yeah.
And too many teams don't have them. The really good teams, they have the star power, and they have the guys behind them who know what they're supposed to do. They know when to do it. They know how to do it. They're consistent. They're there shift after shift. And they have a goaltender who can steal games.
Absolutely. And and the other thing is, there's a difference between getting a grinder who you can just find just about anywhere, if we're being honest, and grinders who are competent defensively.
That's a good point.
Yeah, like I said, Coleman, Goodrow, Tampa identified those guys. They paid the price to get them, and they were phenomenal in the postseason for the Lightning. But it's one thing for somebody like Buffalo. We mentioned that they had just brought back Gergesons on a $2.2 million a year deal. It's one thing to go out and get those grinder types, but it's another thing to get those grinder types who are also good defensively. You think of the great checking lines over the years.
You mean like Ramsey and Luce?
Yeah, well, that too. But if you also look at like Detroit when they had the grind line back in the '90s, early 2000s, you had Chris Draper, Kirk Maltby, Darren McCarty.
That's a great line.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just see the fact that you know that line from the '90s and the importance that team that line had to that team speaks volumes.
You can't honestly. You can't just find a Chris Draper anywhere because not only was he a good grinder, but he was phenomenal defensively. Great face-off guy. I think at one point he got a couple Silky votes too.
It probably did. Can the Sabres please find two guys like that?
Yeah,
I would be very happy if they did.
You look at somebody like New Jersey when they won their first cup. Who did they have? They had the crash line: Bobby Holik, Mike Peluso, and Randy McKay. That's where Detroit got that idea for the grind line from. If you have those grinders, they've got to be able to play defensively. Sometimes people just get it, like you said, get a guy like a Wayne Simmons or somebody like that, and you just throw them on the fourth line and say, "Oh, go out and check these guys." Well, okay, maybe they're physical, but can they play defensively? Not exactly.
And of course, you got to have goaltending.
Yeah.
I get it. Goals are scored, a lot of goals.
Yep.
But look, even Grant Fuhr, one of the greats of all time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Played on a great Edmonton team. He might give up 4 goals, but when the Oilers made it 5-4, he never gave up the 5th goal, right?
Yep.
So.
And Buffalo's lacked that since Ryan Miller left. And Robin Leonard had the potential to do that, but it just wasn't a good place.
Well, he had other personal issues that you just hope as a human being he conquers and keeps them conquered and lives up to his potential as a player and has a great life. You don't want to see anybody go through that, and unfortunately, he was going through that. Apparently the worst of that here. So he got himself right. That's what's important.
Yep. And Buffalo does need goaltending.
I think so.
And
they better hope that if they're going to stick and wait for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, he better be the guy.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Buffalo could have stolen another, let's say 5 wins or so this year if they had competent goaltending. Because honestly, defensively, Buffalo's been a mess for years. But when there were points this year where they did improve a little bit defensively, but not much. But if they had goaltending to be able to make up for the mistakes that they did make, they could have stolen a couple wins.
Well,
they didn't have that.
To put it bluntly, there are times goaltenders simply have to make saves.
Yeah.
Period. Which is what you're getting at. I think, believe it or not, it's hard to be optimistic with the Sabres, but I really, really like Ralph Kruger.
Yeah.
I think he's a great coach. I think the team believes in him. I think the guy in the real hottest seat, even though he's just started his job, is Kevin Adams. He's got a lot of he's got to make some moves that take this team into the playoffs.
Right.
Because 9 years without is again unacceptable.
Yeah, and it's completely. I believe if they miss the playoffs the next 2 years, they'll set a new league record for consecutive years out of the playoffs, and that's in a place like Buffalo, where for the vast majority of their first 40 years of existence, they were pretty much always in the postseason. That is completely unacceptable. And you know what? And Adams has a lot to show. He's got a lot to do to prove that he's not just Terry Pegula's whipping boy. You know what I mean? He came up working for them in a variety of roles, and it's like, okay, well, does he really have the chops to be a general manager, or is he just going to be a guy who's just got to take orders from ownership?
I'm going to say he's got the chops to be a GM. Now, will he make enough of the right moves?
That's the
$64,000 question.
Yeah.
And Eric Stahl was a very good start. Gergensen, is that a good? Cahoon, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. The Stahl trade is a good starting point. I mean, I think
it is.
I get that he's not in his prime anymore, but he can fill in as a number 2 center and
since they haven't had one
since O'Reilly, yeah, and he can
who?
Yeah, but he can fill in for now and help shelter Dylan Cousins for a little while if he makes the team out of camp. And you know what? If he doesn't want to stay here long term, and Buffalo continues to struggle, they can always flip him. They can trade with a deadline for some assets.
True, and I think there's another problem if and hopefully this doesn't happen. But isn't after 7 years, doesn't Jack Eichel have a little bit more control? Right now, there's a full no trade clause, and after 7 years, doesn't he have a little bit more say in where he might be able to go? And he could tell them after 7 years if they miss the playoffs that's more than enough. 7 years without a sniff. And at that point, which hopefully doesn't happen, but if it does, would anybody blame him? The whole idea behind being a professional athlete or being any athlete is every time you step on that surface, whatever it is, diamond, gridiron, ice, court, the idea is to win and win a championship.
Yeah.
And a young guy like a Jack Eichel, if he goes 7 years and doesn't get a sniff of the postseason, I'd move on too.
Yeah.
And nobody here would fault him for it.
Nobody would blame him.
No.
You know?
So hopefully that's a silly point.
Yeah.
And they're in the playoffs and actually do some damage.
Yeah.
Because
But to that point, if Buffalo ever did trade Jack Eichel, they might as well fold the franchise.
yeah, I would agree with that. That would be terrible. We would all hate that. All right, let's check in with Frank. We got some questions for us.
We have a number of questions for you guys.
Uh-oh.
Actually, I have 4 pretty good ones. If
Oh.
you guys want to answer them for the folks out there.
Well, we'll try. I'll put all the pressure on Tony.
Well, you guys have been talking about the Sabres for the last 5 minutes or so, so I'll start with some of the Sabre questions. We have the first one came in from Ben, and Ben's question was in regards to the Sabres draft pick. Were you surprised they picked Jack Quinn over guys that were on the board at the time, Marco Rossi, Cole Perfetti, being 2 of those players? Are you surprised they went with Quinn when Twitterverse was kind of shouting that it was going to be Perfetti and Rossi? And not just fans. It was, Sabres media guys were tweeting that, Perfetti's there, Rossi's there. There was no mention of Jack Quinn whatsoever.
Well, the thing with Quinn is maybe their front office just thinks that maybe he's got a higher ceiling than somebody like Rossi and Perfetti do. I mean, like I mentioned before. I mean, Rossi, I get that he drove a good portion of Quinn's game, but at the same time, somebody's got to put the puck in the back of the net. You know what I mean? And he's got a heck of a shot. This kid, he really does.
Well, I'll go back and say what I said before. You can't have enough goal scorers. Was I surprised? I saw you got to be careful with Twitter because there's a lot of crazy things that go on in the Twitterverse. I saw all that, and I'm just very glad they took a guy who's a goal scorer, period. You can't have enough goal scorers, and there's really nothing else I can say about it. Take the goal scorer. Listen, if you have a choice between a guy who's a great passer or a great finisher, take the finisher.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah. I mean, and not only that, but I lost track of thought.
That's okay. So did Tom Brady. You're human. We get it.
Yep.
Next, Frank.
Well, there's one more that kind of ties into the Bills here, and this comes from Elaine. And her question is, have you lost confidence in the Pagulas, not just as owners of the Sabres, but of the Bills? Have you lost confidence at all in the Pagulas as owners of professional sports teams?
Well, they got extremely lucky getting Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott and the rest of the front office and coaching staff, and they're just stepping out of the way and let them do their thing. But with the Sabres, the thing with Terry is that, don't forget, he was a season ticket holder to the Sabres for 20 years. He's one of those fans who thinks he knows everything, but doesn't really know as much. Hopefully, he does not meddle with this team. You just gotta step away and let Adams and everybody else do their thing.
Well, in terms of the Bills, they made a great hire with Sean McDermott.
Yeah.
And then he helped them bring Brandon Beane in, and that, to me, is one of the best tandems in the NFL. I like everything about them, even though I get, sick of trust the process. But it's true, and they've got that team on the upward trajectory. As far as the Sabres go, it's very frustrating, and you got to separate all your emotions. They have struggled as owners, despite all the great things they've done for the region. To say that I've lost confidence, well, you gotta hope that Kevin Adams works out and it restores a little bit of whatever might have been lost, in the sense that you hired a guy with no experience. That's a big risk.
Yeah.
And, maybe they'll get lucky there too. Listen, I like Kevin. I think he's a great guy, and he's always succeeded at whatever role he's been in, and hopefully there's no reason to believe he won't, other than the fact he has no experience. But what did we say earlier about great GMs? You got to be willing to take a risk. Well, maybe as owners, you got to be willing to take a risk too. Is Kevin a risk? It's a guy they know. They're comfortable with him. They've made tons of mistakes. I get it.
Yeah.
But anybody in a public position who owns a professional sports team is going to be under scrutiny. Elaine asked that question. It's a great question. You know, I could easily sit here and hammer them left and right.
Yeah, we all could, to be honest here.
I just don't want to do that. The Bills are doing great. They're fun to watch, and I like the Ralph Kruger hiring. Ralph, to me, was a great hire. And we'll see how it pans out with Kevin Adams. And then maybe we'll see after whatever Kevin does, then maybe I'll say, okay, I lost confidence in him. Or better yet, I'll say, no, I haven't. They do a lot of things that drive me crazy, like the whole thing about we want to be, you know, money's never an object. And all of a sudden, a couple of years later, we got to operate on a more frugal basis. And they allowed some really horrible stuff, apparently, to go on inside their organization. And that kind of culture, that's very, very disappointing, to say the least. And Chris Bandura should still be there if he wanted to be there. That's a personal thing with me. I took that very personally. But so have I lost confidence in them? I don't know if I ever really had confidence in them to begin with. I was just glad they bought the team. Let's put it that way.
Right. What else we got, Frank?
Okay, so more of a Bills question here. With regards to the Titans, what should the NFL do with the Titans if they have any more outbreaks? And can you blame the players for going off and organizing a practice on their own?
Absolutely, yes, I can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
it's irresponsible.
Even if you know, John Robinson, the general manager there, and Mike Vrabel, the head coach, even if they did tell them to do that, it's still up to them. They still got to make that decision to be smart and don't risk giving this virus and spreading it to other people. And what have there been now? 23 people within the franchise who have had contracted that virus. This isn't necessarily the flu where you could just get it and be sick for a while and then be gone. You know, millions of people worldwide have lost their lives due to this. You know, it's not.
Is there millions around the world? That many?
Oh yeah,
that's horrible.
It's just a.
Well, you know, to your point about if Robinson and Vrabel knew, then they should be fired.
Yeah, if they knew and they allowed this to go on, then
if they didn't stop it.
Yeah, and they, exactly. If they did nothing to stop it, then they've got to pay some sort of a heavy penalty, whether it's fines,
draft picks,
losing draft picks,
forfeits. I don't like the idea of forfeits because the other guys deserve to get paid.
Yeah, but at the same time, the NFL's got to come down hard and make an example of them and say we're not going to put up with this crap.
Agreed, but the problem, a forfeit hurts the other teams. Yes. If the schedule wise, yes, it hurts the other teams, but forfeit really hurts them. The guys don't get paid. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to get paid, right? We're all human. Everybody wants to get paid, and you know, smack them with a huge fine. And remember, there's a lot of money at stake here, and draft choices,
or even suspensions. They can even suspend
that too. And you know what? Go ahead, suspend their season. But unfortunately, that hurts all the other teams that they're supposed to play against.
Figure out which guys were at that high school they were practicing at,
and suspend them,
and suspend them,
and then make them play.
Yeah, that too. I mean, you could. I mean, I'm sure we could probably figure out which guys were at that high school because it was probably the guys who were attacking, you know, Jim Wyatt,
the media guys,
and Paul Kuharsky, the guys who were on that story to begin with. And I know one of them at least was the Roger Saffold, one of the offensive linemen there. He and a couple other guys were attacking the media. And it's like, okay, well, you wouldn't be attacking them if you didn't use common sense to begin with.
Well, it's always easy to blame the media, right? We lost. It's the media's fault.
Yeah, really.
But last time I checked, the media didn't do it.
Yeah, but you know what? And you know what the media's thing is to do? Hold people accountable.
Yeah.
That's what their role is to do. And unfortunately, Tennessee did not hold themselves accountable.
Well, and you know, everybody has to use common sense, and the NFL has put protocols in place to hopefully avoid the situations that the Titans have created. Mm-hmm. They didn't pay attention to protocols, so the NFL needs to take draconian action. And I say it as a fan of a team they're supposed to play, that they've screwed up our schedule. Mm-hmm. They screwed up the Pittsburgh Steelers schedule. They've had a dramatic impact outside of what goes on in the Titans organization, and that should not be tolerated.
Right.
Got any more questions, Frank? Any from Dennis?
Nothing from Dennis this week, but Sean has a question, probably geared more towards Stu, because I think last time the Bills were relevant, Tony was probably in diapers. Really relevant.
Thanks, Frank. I needed that.
Hey, look at the last time they were in the playoffs. That was what, 20 years ago, late 90s, right? I mean, at least before 2017, it was late 90s. I was 4th, 5th grade, 6th grade, actually, with the Music City Miracle.
I don't like you anymore, and I got other issues with you, but that's okay. No, I'm just kidding.
That's okay, still.
Go ahead.
Don't shoot the messenger. Sean wants to know, do you see similarities between this Bills team and those from the late 80s, early 90s, and talk about any similarities you see between Brandon Beane and Bill Polian?
I see a lot of similarities. Bill Polian, John Butler, Marv Levy talked about football temperament. Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane talked about football DNA. So it's a different terminology for what is essentially, I think, the same kind of thing. And if you look at Josh Allen and Jim Kelly, great leadership, great toughness, big arm, and a winner. Now, and remember, Kelly didn't come here as a raw rookie because he played a couple of years in the USFL with Houston. Kelly saved a franchise that was just in complete, total disarray, and then they added pieces around him. Now, Josh Allen didn't necessarily save the franchise, but was a huge piece of them going forward. But I do see a lot of similarities. The Bills of the 90s, the K-gun offense, great offense. The defense wasn't always dominant. And in some of those years, the defense, when it wasn't dominant, would force a lot of turnovers. So they might give up yards and some points and everything, but they turned the ball over, and when they turned it over, the offense took advantage of it. So I think there are a lot of similarities in a lot of areas. There's no Thurman Thomas on this current team, but, guys like Thurman are really hard to find, Hall of Famers. Now, is Stefan Diggs, Andre Reed, different athletes, but, the impact, and they traded for him. They didn't, they drafted Andre. So while the construction of the team is a little bit different because maybe the Bills back then were more draft choices and a few trades.
And free agency didn't quite exist at that
That's
point.
right. It was different, and it was just beginning. Brandon Beane has a great eye for talent. The 90s Bills, the current Bills, had great scouting staffs. I'm sure analytics is much more prevalent now than it was then. But you got to have the eyes, and you got to have the gut feeling, and you got to be able to project. This guy is the kind of character guy we want, and I'm big on smart athletes. I don't care what the sport is. You have to understand the situation, the clock, the whole 9 yards. Hey, that's a pretty good pun. I didn't mean it, but you have to understand where you are in the game, down and distance, and just everything of the surroundings of the situation. So I see a lot of similarities, and I'll tell you what. There was a time where I almost hated Sundays because I knew the Bills were going to find a way to lose. Well, this current group, somewhat like that team in the 90s, this current group has the makeup of a team that will find a way to win. And tons of similarities, and I can't tell you how optimistic I am. Josh Allen is very good, and the third year is a big year, and he continues to get better.
Right.
And Jim Kelly is one of my all-time favorite athletes. Toughness, leadership, guts. He threw an interception. He'd make sure he'd make the tackle. Broke his leg doing it once, but just that toughness and that leadership, and this team loves Josh. Maybe there was a little bit of discord on the 90s Bills. I don't see any of that on this team because they had the bickering Bills, but then they kind of grew out of that and became a team that to this day those guys are still really good friends, and I see that happening much more quickly with this group. So there are a lot of similarities. Yes, is the answer.
Yep. Now the other thing is, knowing my history of the Bills, what this team kind of gives me the vibes of. You think? I mean, everybody talks about the 4 straight Super Bowl teams, and the year before that the bickering Bills, because that produced a lot of headlines, right? But I'll tell you what. The team that gets lost in the shuffle among that Bills era was the '88 team.
They started 12-1, right?
Something like that. But they won the AFC East that year for the first time in probably I think 8 years.
Yep, since the 1980
I
team.
get that was the year I was born, '88.
I really don't like it.
but anyway, they end up reaching the AFC Championship game that year against Cincinnati.
Yep, I was at that game.
Yep.
Do you know that nobody knows this, so I'm going to tell you something. I shot an entire post-game show with Ed Kilgore, my man Ed, doing post-game interviews with one battery. And it was my last battery because I shot the game, and I was dying because all my batteries were fresh at the start of the game, and they died fast. And I'm like, please just let this battery finish this show. And I'll tell you something else. In that game, Bruce Smith started out like a house on fire. Anthony Munoz couldn't handle him. So at one point, Munoz just took his knee and boom, right into Bruce's quad. And it hurt Bruce. Because that play just happened to ISO on Bruce. Yeah. And I was like, that was pretty dirty, Anthony. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, I get it. But anyways, this is it's a young team. I know last year they reached the playoffs. But this is a young team that's learning how to win.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And they're on the upswing. That's why I compare them to the '88 team, because that was a team, like I said, they got lost in the shuffle a little bit, but that team, they got to the playoffs for the first time in a long time. They won in the playoffs. They got to the AFC title game. They ended up losing to a team that reached the Super Bowl and lost to San Francisco. But and the other thing is, from that team that Buffalo ended up taking was the no huddle. They ended up taking that concept away from Cincinnati. The funny thing was that Marv Levy complained before that game and saying, "Oh, the no huddle, it skirts the spirit of the game." And
spirit of the rules.
And then the ironic thing is that Marv ended up taking that idea from Sam Weish and applying it to his own offense. But this Bills team does give some vibes of that '88 team a little bit.
I think the reason the '88 team gets lost in the shuffle because the '89 team was 9-7 and just barely won the division. I think.
And they were the bickering Bills.
That was the bickering Bills, and didn't they? The no huddle was born against Cleveland in that wild card game that year, wasn't it? The '89 team. It was 89.
It was 89 against Cleveland.
And that's the game Don Beebe got landed on his head, and that was right in front of me because I shot that too.
The Ronnie Harmon drop game.
Yeah, you had to bring
not to drudge up bad memories.
You
but,
had to bring it up, didn't you? We got another question for Frank?
The bickering Bills, I believe, didn't that circle around Chris Burkett to some degree? Was he part of that at all?
It was actually
it was House Ballard and Jim Kelly, because Ballard blew a block against Indianapolis, and then in the post game, because Kelly was injured. He kind of,
he pointed the finger.
He called him out for it, and Ballard didn't like that.
But it was a cable TV show in Rochester where I think Thurman was on the show, and somebody asked him what the problem was with the Bills, and he said quarterback. And then they had this big press conference where Thurman and Jim were all there, and they read this statement, and after that, everybody seemed to get along okay. and like I said, these guys are great friends now, but sometimes you got to go through things to come out on the right end, but there doesn't seem to be any of that at all on this Bills team. I mean, it's like they're in a boat and they're all rowing in the same direction, and But are there similarities? Yes. And wouldn't it be amazing if this team could do with the one thing that team couldn't do?
Bring home
that would be
trophy?
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
And they got some great pieces in place. And again, I hate to keep going back to it, but the young quarterback. He is so exciting, and he seems so humble.
Yeah, I mean, it's so refreshing to see the Bills have a quarterback who's not only just young and a great leader, but is also very, very good. And it's been a very, very long time.
Yeah, you're not kidding. All right, well, that's kind of a wrap for this week. Frank is trying to tell me something. Go ahead, tell me.
Well, people are dying to hear your picks for this.
Oh, the picks.
The picks, yeah, I almost forgot about that.
Go ahead, you go first.
Even though the game's being moved to Tennessee, I still see Buffalo pulling this one out. Being moved to Tuesday. The Titans got a good defense. Buffalo scored 30 points in every game this year. Although they were against Miami, the Jets, the Raiders, and the Rams, I'll take Buffalo 28. Buffalo 28 to Tennessee's 17.
Okay, we'll agree on one thing. That's maybe the 17. I'm going to say Buffalo's going to explode for 42.
Okay.
I know the Titans, they have a good defense. I think that organization is in disarray, and I can't imagine how they could actually be focused on playing a game. So I think the Bills explode this week, go to 5-0, and get ready to face Kansas City. And that might be a little bit of a fan pick, but I don't see how Tennessee can, who's going to be able to play anyway? Do we know that anyway?
Yeah, I mean, nobody knows if half of those guys are even going to be able to appear in the lineup. You never know.
So, and I'm guessing that the Titans players who weren't involved in that workout and in that COVID, they're really angry at the guys who were because they all suffer because of it. So you want to talk about a team that might have some bickering on it? So I say the Bills explode and beat them 42-17.
Yeah. I mean, and you know what Tennessee's really lucky for? That the league expanded practice squads this year. Because they're probably going to have to call up a whole bunch of guys off the practice squad to be able to fill in.
I just see this as a blowout for the Bills. I just can't. There's no way they can lose this game. There's no way.
This cloud hanging over the Titans, I can't see it either.
No, me neither. Well, thank you for joining us on the Buffalo Sports Report, brought to you by AdPro and Logistics Plus. I'm Stu Boyar. He's Tony Fiorello, and the guy behind the glass is the big man, Frank Wolf. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you right back here next week, same time, same station. And I love saying that, too. It's one of my favorite sayings as a kid. All right, have a great week, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Buffalo Sports Report, presented by 300 Level Media, sponsored by Logistics Plus of Buffalo, providing services for all of your logistics needs.